This is embarrassing. For you, for this university, for everyone forced to sit through this circus. Professor Martin Schaefer stood at the back of the dissertation defense room, arms crossed, voice dripping with contempt. His reputation preceded him. 35 years at Stanford, 12 published books, winner of every major award in economics. When Martin Schaefer spoke, people listened. Right now, he was destroying Imani Thompson. Ms. Thompson, your thesis proposes that microfinance structures in sub-Saharan Africa could revolutionize global poverty reduction. That's not research. That's a fantasy. Imani stood at the front of the room, her presentation frozen on the screen behind her. 26 years old, black, the only African-American PhD candidate in Stanford's economics department. She'd spent 5 years on this research, traveled to Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, interviewed 847 people, built economic models that challenged everything traditional economics assumed about poverty. And Martin Schaefer was calling it a circus. Sir, if you look at the data on slide 47, I don't need to look at your slides. Schaefer's voice cut through the room like a blade. I've read enough to know this work doesn't meet Stanford standards. Your methodology is flawed. Your conclusions are wishful thinking dressed up as scholarship. And frankly, your presence in this program is a testament to how far we've lowered the bar for diversity admissions. The room went silent. 15 people, faculty, students, guests, all stared. Imani's dissertation committee sat at the front table. 3 professors who should have defended her, should have stopped this. They said nothing. Professor Linda Morrison, Imani's advisor, looked at her lap. Professor James Park shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Professor Richard Chen cleared his throat but didn't speak. Silence, complicity, Schaefer continued. I move that this committee reject this dissertation immediately. Ms. Thompson should be dismissed from the PhD program for academic inadequacy. Imani's hands shook. 5 years of work, 5 years of believing she could make a difference, 5 years of fighting to be taken seriously. All destroyed in 3 minutes by a man who hadn't even read her full thesis. May I respond? Imani's voice was quiet but steady. There's nothing to respond to. Your work speaks for itself. Then let me speak for my work. Schaefer smiled, cold and cruel. By all means, defend the indefensible. Imani looked at the 15 people in the room. At the committee that had abandoned her, at the students who'd come to support her, now avoiding eye contact, at Schaefer, so confident in his superiority. She made a decision. She would defend her work, not because she thought she could win, but because someone needed to say the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. What Imani didn't know, in exactly 12 years, she would stand in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize in Economics. Martin Schaefer would be in the audience, watching the student he'd tried to destroy become the most celebrated economist of her generation. And the week after that, she would become his boss. Have you ever been told you weren't good enough by someone who never bothered to understand your worth? 12 years earlier, Imani Thompson grew up in Southside Chicago, in a neighborhood where gunshots were normal and college was a dream most kids didn't dare to have. Her mother, Patricia Thompson, cleaned houses. Her father disappeared when Imani was 4. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with Imani's grandmother and 2 younger brothers. Money was a constant stress, food was rationed, heat was a luxury in winter, but books were everywhere. Patricia had one rule: education was non-negotiable. She dropped out of high school when she got pregnant with Imani, spent her life wondering what she could have become. She made sure Imani would never wonder. Imani got straight A's. Not because she was naturally brilliant, but because she worked 3 times harder than everyone else. While other kids watched TV, Imani studied. While friends went to parties, Imani went to the library. She got a full scholarship to Northwestern, majored in economics, graduated summa cum laude. Then she applied to Stanford's PhD program in economics. The rejection letter came first. We appreciate your application, but our program is extremely competitive. Then, 2 weeks later, a second letter. Acceptance, full funding. Imani found out later what happened. Stanford had admitted 0 black students to the economics PhD program that year. The administration forced the department to reconsider. They reluctantly accepted Imani as their diversity admit. She was the token, the quota, the box they checked so they could claim progress. Martin Schaefer voted against her admission. He made that clear from day one. "You're here because of your skin color, not your merit," he told her during orientation. "Don't expect special treatment." Imani proved him wrong for 5 years. Top grades in every class, research that got noticed by major journals, conference presentations that earned standing ovations. But Schaefer never acknowledged any of it. To him, she was always the diversity admit who didn't belong. Her dissertation topic emerged from a summer research trip to Kenya during her 3rd year. She'd gone to study microfinance programs, small loans to poor people, usually women, to start businesses. Traditional economics dismissed these programs as insignificant, too small scale to matter. But Imani saw something different. She interviewed women who'd used $50 loans to start vegetable stands. Within 2 years, they were feeding their families, sending kids to school, building savings. She saw patterns, networks, community-based economic structures that traditional models couldn't explain. She built a new framework, mathematical models showing how small-scale interventions could create systemic change. How poverty wasn't just lack of money, but lack of access to opportunity. Her thesis argued that microfinance, when structured correctly, could lift entire communities out of poverty more effectively than large-scale foreign aid. It was revolutionary, challenging every assumption economists like Schaefer had built careers on. When she submitted her dissertation proposal, Schaefer wrote a 10-page rebuttal. Fundamentally unsound, methodologically suspect, based on anecdotal evidence rather than rigorous analysis. But Imani's committee approved it, barely. 3-2 vote. For the next 2 years, Imani worked 18-hour days. She collected data from 4 countries. She built economic models that accounted for variables traditional economics ignored: social capital, community trust, gender dynamics. She created something genuinely new. Her committee knew it. Linda Morrison called it groundbreaking. James Park said it was the best dissertation he'd seen in 20 years. But Martin Schaefer had other plans. The week before her defense, he submitted a formal complaint to the dean. "Imani Thompson's dissertation does not meet our standards. I request permission to attend her defense and evaluate the work myself." The dean, wanting to avoid controversy, granted permission. Schaefer showed up to destroy her, and he almost succeeded. The defense, the fight back. Imani stood at the front of the room, Martin Schaefer's words still hanging in the air like poison. "Your presence in this program is a testament to how far we've lowered the bar for diversity admissions." 15 people watched, waiting. "May I respond?" Imani's voice was quiet but steady. "By all means, defend the indefensible." Imani took a breath, looked at her presentation screen, at 5 years of work reduced to an insult. "Professor Schaefer, you said my methodology is flawed. Can you specify which aspect?" Schaefer waved dismissively. "Your sample size is too small. 847 interviews across 4 countries? That's statistically insignificant." "Sir, 847 is larger than the sample size used in the studies you cited in your 2009 book on global trade patterns. You used 412 interviews across 3 countries and called it comprehensive." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone had done their homework. Schaefer's jaw tightened. "That's different. I was studying established economies with reliable data infrastructure. And I'm studying communities where reliable data infrastructure doesn't exist. That's precisely why primary research is necessary." Imani clicked to her next slide. Traditional economic models fail in these contexts because they assume conditions that don't exist for 40% of the world's population. Professor Chen leaned forward slightly. "Interested?" Schaefer pressed on. "Your conclusions are based on wishful thinking. You claim microfinance can solve poverty, but there's no evidence. There's 5 years of evidence in my dissertation." Imani's voice was stronger now. Chapter 4 shows loan repayment rates of 97% among women in rural Kenya. While Chapter 6 demonstrates a 34% increase in household income within 18 months. Chapter 8 models the ripple effects across entire villages. She clicked through slides rapid fire. Graphs, charts, statistical models, all meticulously documented. You said you've read enough to know my work doesn't meet standards. How much did you actually read, Professor Schaefer? Silence. Sir? Schaefer's face reddened. I read the abstract and the first 3 chapters. My thesis is 9 chapters. You rejected 60% of my work without reading it. The room erupted in whispers. Linda Morrison looked up from her lap for the first time, surprise on her face. I've seen enough of this type of research to know, with respect, sir, you've never done this type of research. Amani pulled up another slide. Your entire career focuses on macroeconomic policy in developed nations. You've never studied microfinance, never worked in sub-Saharan Africa, never interviewed a single person living below the poverty line. Professor Park covered his mouth, hiding a smile. Schaefer stood up, his voice rising. I don't need to study poverty to recognize bad scholarship when I see it. But you do need to read a dissertation before rejecting it. Your work is ideological, not academic. You want these programs to succeed, so you've twisted the data to fit your narrative. Imani clicked to a new slide. This is the peer review from the Journal of Development Economics. They're publishing Chapter 5 next quarter. The reviewers called my methodology innovative and rigorous. Another click. This is a letter from Professor Esther Duflo at MIT. She won the Nobel Prize in 2019 for work on poverty. She reviewed my dissertation and called it exceptional scholarship that advances the field significantly. Another click. This is Professor Abhijit Banerjee, Duflo's co-Nobel winner. He invited me to present my findings at MIT next month. The room was completely silent now. Schaffer looked at the slides, then at Imani. Those reviews are irrelevant. This committee approved my proposal 2 years ago, Imani interrupted. This committee has reviewed my progress every semester. This committee has read my complete dissertation and recommended I proceed to defense. She looked at Morrison, Park, and Chen. Unless something has changed in the past week? All 3 shook their heads. Morrison finally found her voice. Imani's work is exemplary. We stand by our recommendation. Schaefer turned on her. Linda, you can't seriously... I can, and I am. Morrison's voice was firm now. You've been trying to sabotage this student for 5 years, Martin. Everyone knows it. Everyone's been too afraid to say it. But I'm done being silent. She stood up. Imani Thompson has produced one of the finest dissertations I've seen in 30 years of teaching. Her methodology is sound. Her data is comprehensive. Her conclusions are supported by evidence. Park stood next. I agree. This work deserves recognition, not ridicule. Chen stood last. I vote to accept the dissertation with highest honors. Schaefer looked around the room, his authority crumbling. This is a travesty. You're passing her because of politics, not merit. No, Morrison said quietly. We're passing her because she's brilliant, and you tried to destroy her because you couldn't handle a black woman being smarter than you. The words hung in the air. Schaefer grabbed his briefcase. You'll regret this, all of you. He stormed out. The door slammed behind him. Silence. Then slowly people started clapping. It grew louder. The students in the back stood. The faculty members joined them. Soon everyone was on their feet, applauding. Morrison walked over to Imani, took her hands. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I was afraid of him. That was cowardly. Imani's eyes filled with tears. You spoke up when it mattered. Dr. Thompson, Park said with a smile, congratulations, you've earned it. Dr. Thompson, she'd done it, but the fight was far from over. The aftermath, the retaliation, Martin Schaefer didn't forgive. He retaliated. The next day, he filed a formal complaint with Stanford's academic council. The economics department has compromised its standards to advance a political agenda. Imani Thompson's dissertation was approved due to pressure to appear diverse, not because of academic merit. The complaint triggered a review. For 6 weeks, Imani's dissertation was re-examined by external reviewers. During that time, Schaefer spread rumors. Stanford is lowering standards. This is what happens when diversity matters more than excellence. We're becoming a joke. Some faculty believed him. Some students repeated his talking points. But the external reviews came back. All 5 reviewers recommended acceptance. 2 called it exceptional. One said it was among the best dissertations in development economics in the past decade. Stanford formally awarded Imani her Ph.D. She graduated in June 2012. No job offers came. Schaefer had made sure of that. He contacted colleagues at every major university, every research institution, every organization that might hire her. She's not qualified. Stanford made a political decision. I wouldn't recommend her. Imani applied to 47 positions, received 47 rejections. She was a Stanford PhD with no prospects. Then, a small organization reached out. The Global Development Initiative, a nonprofit focused on poverty reduction in Africa. They'd read her dissertation. They wanted her to implement her ideas in the field. The salary was $47,000 a year. No prestige. No path to traditional academic success. Imani took it. She moved to Nairobi, Kenya, spent the next 3 years building microfinance programs based on her research. It worked. Loan repayment rates, 98%. Household income increases, 41% average. Children's school enrollment, up 67%. Women's business ownership increased 300%. Village after village transformed. The data was undeniable. In 2015, the World Bank noticed. They hired Imani as a consultant, asked her to scale her model across East Africa. She did. 50,000 families lifted out of poverty in 2 years. In 2017, the International Monetary Fund recruited her. She became their youngest senior economist at age 31. In 2019, she published her first book, Microfinance and Macro Change: How Small Loans Transform Entire Economies. It won the Financial Times Book of the Year award. In 2021, she published her second book, The Economics of Trust: Why Traditional Models Fail the World's Poor. It became required reading in economics departments worldwide. In 2023, she was appointed chief economist at the United Nations Development Program. And in October 2024, the Nobel Prize. Dr. Thompson, this is Goran Hansson from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. I'm calling to inform you that you've been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. Imani was in her office at the UN in New York. She'd been reviewing poverty reduction data from Bangladesh. The words didn't register at first. I'm sorry, what? The Nobel Prize in Economics. For your groundbreaking work demonstrating that microfinance structures, when properly designed, can create sustainable poverty reduction at scale. Your research has fundamentally changed how we understand economic development. Imani sat down. The phone shook in her hand. The ceremony will be in Stockholm on December 10th. Congratulations, Dr. Thompson. You've earned this. The news broke an hour later. Imani Thompson wins Nobel Prize in Economics at 38. Youngest woman ever to win Economics Nobel. From Southside Chicago to Stockholm, the remarkable story of Dr. Imani Thompson. Her phone exploded. Calls from reporters, colleagues, friends, family. Her mother called, crying, "Baby, you did it. You really did it." Messages poured in from everywhere, except one place, Stanford. Well, almost everyone at Stanford. Linda Morrison sent a heartfelt congratulations. James Park called her personally. Richard Chen sent champagne, but the economics department itself, the institution that had almost rejected her thesis, silence for 3 days, until they realized the PR value of having a Nobel laureate among their alumni. Then, suddenly, Stanford is proud to announce that our distinguished alumna, Dr. Imani Thompson, has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. Imani saw the press release and laughed bitterly. But the story wasn't over yet, because Stanford had another announcement coming, one that would bring everything full circle. The return. 2 weeks after winning the Nobel Prize, Imani received a call from Stanford's president, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes. Dr. Thompson, congratulations on your Nobel Prize. Stanford would like to offer you a position, chair of the economics department, full professor with tenure. You'd be the youngest department chair in university history. Imani was quiet. I know you might have complicated feelings about Stanford, but I'll accept on one condition. Name it. Martin Schaefer retires immediately. No retirement party, no emeritus title, no continued affiliation with the university. And he leaves completely. Silence on the other end. Dr. Thompson, Professor Schaefer has been with Stanford for 37 years. He's a distinguished, He tried to destroy my career because I'm black and he couldn't handle being challenged. He spread lies to prevent me from getting hired. He's created a hostile environment for every minority student in that department for decades." Amani's voice was steel. "If you want me, he goes. Those are my terms." Hayes was quiet for 30 seconds. "I'll call you back." 3 days later, Stanford announced that Professor Martin Schaefer was retiring effective immediately for personal reasons. 1 week later, Stanford announced that Dr. Amani Thompson, Nobel laureate, would become the youngest chair of the economics department in the university's history. The press conference was scheduled for January 15, 2025. Stanford invited everyone: faculty, students, media, donors. They invited Martin Schaefer too. He was still cleaning out his office, still technically employed until the end of the month. He came to the press conference, sat in the back, watched. The press conference. The auditorium was packed, 400 people, cameras everywhere. Stanford was celebrating its Nobel Prize winner. President Hayes gave the introduction. "It is my extraordinary privilege to introduce Dr. Amani Thompson, Nobel laureate in economics and Stanford's new department chair." Applause thundered through the room. Amani walked to the podium, poised, confident. 12 years ago, she'd stood in a different room in this building, being torn apart by a man who didn't think she belonged. Today, she was his boss. "Thank you, President Hayes. Thank you all for this welcome." Amani smiled. "Some of you may remember that my relationship with Stanford hasn't always been easy." Nervous laughter. 12 years ago, I defended my dissertation in this building. A professor told me my work was embarrassing, that I was proof Stanford had lowered the bar for diversity admissions. He moved to have me dismissed from the PhD program. The room went silent. Everyone knew who she was talking about. Martin Schaefer sat in the back, his face expressionless. "That professor was wrong. My dissertation wasn't embarrassing. It was groundbreaking. I wasn't a diversity admit who didn't belong. I was a scholar whose ideas threatened the status quo." Amani looked directly at Schaefer. "I want to say something to that professor now, and to everyone like him who uses diversity as a slur, who assumes that black students, black scholars, black excellence is somehow lesser." She paused. "You were wrong about me, about my work, about everything you said that day. I spent 12 years proving you wrong. I took my embarrassing research to Kenya and lifted 50,000 families out of poverty. I took my flawed methodology to the World Bank and the IMF and the UN. I took my indefensible conclusions and won the Nobel Prize." The room erupted in applause. "But here's the thing," Amani continued when it quieted. "I didn't do this to prove you wrong. I did it because the work mattered, because 700 million people live in extreme poverty, because economic models that ignore them are incomplete, because someone needed to see what traditional economics refused to see." She looked around the room. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to build, to make this department a place where all ideas are welcome, where students are judged by their scholarship, not their skin color, where diversity isn't a threat, it's an asset." More applause. "To the students here today, especially students of color, you belong, not because of quotas or politics, because you earned your place. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." She looked at Schaefer one last time. "And to those who doubt us, watch us. We're going to change the world, whether you believe in us or not." The applause was deafening. After the press conference, as people mingled, Martin Schaefer approached Amani. They stood face to face for the first time in 12 years. "Congratulations on your Nobel Prize," he said stiffly. "Thank you. I may have been too harsh in your dissertation defense." "You were wrong. There's a difference between harsh and wrong." Schaefer's face reddened. "I stand by my assessment that your work was not sufficiently rigorous for—" "Professor Schaefer, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences disagrees. The World Bank disagrees. The IMF disagrees. The UN disagrees. And most importantly, the 50,000 families who escaped poverty because of my work disagree." She stepped closer. "You can stand by your assessment all you want. History has already judged, and history says you were wrong." Schaefer opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in his life, Martin Schaefer had nothing to say. He turned and walked away. Amani watched him go, Linda Morrison appeared at her side. That must have felt good. You know what feels better? Knowing that he'll spend the rest of his life watching students like me succeed, watching everything he tried to stop become reality. Morrison smiled. Welcome home, Dr. Thompson. Thank you. Now let's get to work. 6 months later, the transformation. Under Imani's leadership, Stanford's economics department changed dramatically. She recruited 5 new faculty members, all focused on development economics, behavioral economics, and non-traditional approaches. 3 were women. 4 were people of color. She redesigned the curriculum, added courses on global inequality, gender economics, climate economics, made fieldwork a requirement for PhD students. She created the Schaefer Fellowship, named ironically after the professor who'd tried to stop her. It provided full funding for underrepresented students pursuing economics PhDs. Applications to Stanford's economics program increased 340%. Diversity applications increased 600%. The department went from having 1 black PhD student 12 years ago to having 12. And Imani made sure every single one knew, you belong here. One afternoon, a first-year student named Zara Williams knocked on Imani's office door. Young black woman, brilliant, terrified. Dr. Thompson, can I talk to you? Of course. Come in. Zara sat down, nervous. I'm working on my research proposal. It's about cryptocurrency adoption in Zimbabwe, but I'm worried. Worried about what? That people will think it's not serious enough, not rigorous. That I only got in because of diversity and I'm wasting the opportunity with, I don't know, a weird research. Imani smiled. She'd heard this before, 12 years ago, from herself. Let me tell you a story. When I was a PhD student here, a very famous professor told me my research was embarrassing, that I didn't belong, that I was proof Stanford had lowered its standards. Zara's eyes widened. Really? Who? Doesn't matter. What matters is I believed him for about 5 minutes, then I decided he was wrong. And I spent the next 12 years proving it. She pulled out a photo from her desk, her Nobel Prize ceremony. This is what embarrassing research looks like when you're brave enough to pursue it. Don't let anyone make you small, Zara. Do the work that matters to you. Be rigorous, be thorough, be excellent. But don't let fear of judgment stop you from asking important questions. Zara left the office with tears in her eyes and fire in her heart. That's what Imani did now, every day. Build up the students that people like Schaefer tried to tear down. 5 years later, the legacy. In 2030, the Economics Nobel Prize was awarded to 3 of Imani's former students. All 3 had done field research in developing nations. All 3 had challenged traditional economic models. All 3 were people of color. When interviewed, all 3 credited the same person, Dr. Imani Thompson. She taught us that economics isn't just equations, it's people, and if your models don't account for all people, they're incomplete. Imani's own research continued. She published 2 more books. She advised the World Bank, the IMF, the UN, and dozens of governments. Her microfinance models had been implemented in 47 countries. Over 2 million families had been lifted out of poverty. But she was most proud of Stanford, the department she'd built, the students she'd mentored, the culture she'd transformed. One day, Linda Morrison, now retired, visited campus. You did it, Linda said. You changed everything. Imani looked around at the diverse, brilliant students working in the department. We did it. You stood up when it mattered. 12 years late. Better late than never. They walked through campus together, past the building where Imani's dissertation defense had happened. Do you ever think about that day? Linda asked. Every time I meet a student who's been told they don't belong, Imani said, and I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Your presence is not a favor. Your excellence is not a surprise. You earned this. Now go prove them all wrong. Martin Schaefer died in 2032 at age 79. The Stanford Economics Department sent flowers to the funeral. Imani didn't attend. She was in Tanzania, implementing a new microfinance program that would eventually serve 100,000 families. When asked about Schaefer's death, she said simply, I hope he found peace, but I won't pretend he was right. History already decided that. Schaeffer's obituary mentioned his 37 years at Stanford, his 12 books, his awards. It didn't mention Imani Thompson, but Imani's obituary, when she finally passed at age 94, would tell a different story. Dr. Imani Thompson, Nobel laureate, transformed how the world understands poverty. She proved that excellence has no color, that the best ideas come from those who've lived the problems they're solving. And that diversity isn't about lowering standards, it's about raising them. She was told she didn't belong. She proved belonging isn't granted, it's earned. And she spent her life making sure no other student would be told they weren't good enough. That was the legacy. Not the Nobel Prize, not the books, not the fame, but the students who believed in themselves because someone finally believed in them. If you've ever been told you don't belong, this story is for you. If someone ever called you a diversity admit like it was an insult, this story is for you. If you've ever wondered whether you're good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, this story is for you. Imani Thompson proved that the people who doubt you don't determine your destiny. Your work does, your excellence does, your refusal to quit does. Share this if you've ever been underestimated. Comment below if someone told you that you weren't good enough. Subscribe for more stories where excellence wins and prejudice loses. Because 12 years is a long time to wait for justice. But when it comes, it's worth everything.